Excellent. All right. So welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, to our presentation, Turning the Page, Improving the Library Student Assistant Experience. Again, my name is Zachary Vickery. I am the College Archivist Librarian at SUNY Oswego.
And I'm Morgan Bond, the Resource Sharing, Electronic Resources and Systems Librarian. And our third partner here is Erin Kowalski, who has since left us. She's now the Principal Law Librarian for the New York State Unified Court System.
And before continuing, we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So the State University of New York at Oswego would like to recognize, with respect to the Onondaga Nation, the people of the hills, or the central firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the indigenous peoples on whose ancestral lands SUNY Oswego now stands. Please join SUNY Oswego in acknowledging the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora nations, their elders, both past and present, as well as the future 7 generations yet to come. Consistent with the university's values of diversity and equity, inclusion, and social justice, this acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to cultivating relationships with Native American communities through academic collaborations, partnerships, historical recognitions, and community service in order to dismantle the legacies of conquest and colonization. So we were going to do a little bit about ourselves and using the slides from Madison, Wisconsin. I'll go in the right to left order for Morgan. So I'll start off, identify as a sports fan. The photo that was inserted into this slide was from the trip that I actually took to Madison, Wisconsin, and was able to go to a University of Wisconsin football game and go to Camp Randall just days before the conference started, and wanted to share that with the people who attended our conference session and those days later.
And then I'm in the middle. I'm an avid gardener and hiking aficionado. Some would say that I'm gardening obsessed. And then Erin is on the other side. Those are her 2 children. She's a self-proclaimed witchy mom and amateur astrologer. When we presented this in Madison, we weren't sure if people would know exactly where SUNY Oswego is located. So this slide was included for that. It's located on the shore of Lake Ontario, in case anyone isn't sure exactly where we are. It's 35 miles north of Syracuse, New York. Campus is very rural with about 8,000 undergraduates and graduate students. And just to illustrate how rural we are, there are about 8.7 people per cow in Oswego County. When we first started this project, we sat down and looked at what we were starting with. There are 5 units in the library that hire student assistants. Those are the checkout desk, stacks management, resource sharing, reference research help. That's our PRA, peer reference assistant program, archives and special collections, and the technical services, so cataloging serials unit. Over the years, each of these units had developed their own procedures and documentation for hiring and evaluating students. And some of these students work in multiple units, which means they had different procedures, different policies, different everything, which is really confusing for everyone involved.
In our first edition, before looking to revise it, we looked at our applications and the process for it and the issues that came along with it. So as we were reminded, one does not simply go recruiting. Other factors are involved in that process. So with this process, students would fill out a paper application or an electronic application. Paper applications and resumes were collected in a folder, and then electronic applications were printed and added to this same folder. And then the hiring units would check this folder for the application. So we had one place for all these applications that were kind of for people to get their hands on, for supervisors looking for students to hire. So there were some issues with all of this. Number one, the application access and review. This was that some of the departments only saw applications after others. This led to competition regarding access to the folder. Next, with applications not unit or position specific, Applicants would mark down areas in which they were interested in. However, available descriptions of positions and units were limited or non-existent. Work study inconsistencies. So many students didn't know what this was or if they had one. Sometimes students wouldn't check the box, thus eliminating the applications from these crucial first lookovers that the supervisors fought over. And then finally, with always accepting applications, this was an issue as well because the informal feedback that staff received was that students wished that they would hear back if they were not selected. Always accepting applications lent itself to rarely any sort of follow-ups with applicants that were not selected for review, if ever. Also, with the student evaluations themselves. So what we have on the screen on the right side is the most recent version of the form up until we changed everything, right? So this is the overview of the process up until fall 2022, that there was a paper form, and that was used until spring 2020 when COVID hit, and then sent everyone home. And then we were unable to sort of use paper forms in that same way anymore. The enhanced digitized form that you kind of see on the right was in use from spring 2020 to spring 2022. These work from home and minimal contact guidelines led to the creation of this form. This was derived from the paper form with some minor modifications, namely some radio buttons. I'm going to see if this works here. We kind of see like the radio buttons that were on each level. Those were basically one of the major additions to the form so that you could actually check the box and make that work. There were 5 evaluative areas. Supervisors expressed that these areas did not address crucial areas like in a previous form. Supervisors also identified that not all evaluative areas were equal in positional duties. These areas were attendance and punctuality, dependability and accuracy, attitude, customer service, and then an overall rating. And then finally, there were no space for students to provide any sort of reflection or comments as well. The comment section at the very bottom of the form was just for supervisors to talk about that. And then there was nothing else for any sort of student feedback or reflection or anything like that.
Another piece we looked at in the very beginning was our student handbook. So this handbook was put together a few years ago by several members of the Access Services Unit. It was very comprehensive for student assistance based on materials that had been handed down through the years and kind of rewritten and reimagined. But as we looked through this document, we found that parts were outdated, there was repeated or missing information. It was also not equitable. There was a very specific dress code, which we've altered quite a bit. It also was not accessible, and it was very specific to the Access Services Unit and left out the other units. It was about 8 pages in total, and after we looked through and pared down everything, it came out to be about 2 pages of actual content.
So here we are turning the page, and it's my opportunity to show off the Pollyanna statue, which kind of helped with my thinking about finding the positives in a situation. This statue is in my hometown, just outside of my the public library in Littleton, New Hampshire, and this is at the base of the statue my dog Sugar, who is now 14 years old and is chugging right along.
So part of our reimagining was the decision to make a student employment program. So instead of seeing ourselves as just employers of students, we decided to make a program to help us really maintain a structure and set goals for the program. Having a program also allowed for us to have a systematic approach. We could also evaluate the program afterwards, after each semester or year. And programs are meant to serve the institution's community, in this case, our student assistants.
And with that in mind, we started storyboarding in creating this idea that to become a program. So we had met with the director of the Department of Campus Recreation and Fitness to hear what they had recently done to revamp their student evaluation process in September of 2021. This helped us to define our goals and what we hope to achieve in our outcomes. these sort of storyboarding ideas are the following with the bullets that we were hoping to maintain the library's commitment to celebrating diversity, help students articulate job duties and transferable skills to future employers. We hoped to provide feedback along the way to help students grow and improve, and also establish consistency for supervision throughout the library. And then finally, to reach out to career services for further assistance. Which also led us to another question, which was, who are our student assistants? So we want to know a little bit more about them in ways that would help us to develop an inclusive and an equitable program. We hoped to identify gaps in life experiences, meet our student assistants where they are, and avoid assumptions. We realized that we would need to be clear with instruction and specific goals for our student assistants to operate a successful program. And we did this by reaching out to the Institutional Research and Assessment Office to get an idea of what the diversity of our student assistants look like, which will be on this slide. So this slide is the sole focus of it is just to present only our information and not to compare it alongside campus or other nationwide trends. This information came from our Office of Institutional Research and Assessment, which is self-identified information that students enter when they register for classes and not collected by the library itself. So as a sample semester for spring 2022, we had 23 assistants. We had a 3-to-2 female to male makeup. About 40% of student assistants were first generation. You know, this was the first in the family to attend college. 22% identified as being Hispanic, Puerto Rican, or other as an ethnicity. 67% identified as Black or African American, American Indian, or Alaska Native, and roughly 50% of our student workers was awarded work study. And so what does this mean, right, as we kind of reflect on knowing more about our students? So if we know that we have a lot of first generation students, then we need the understanding that this is their first college experience, right? If we know that over half our student assistants identify as other than white, then we need equitable policies and inclusive workspaces. And if we know that well over half our student assistants identify as female, then we need opportunities for growth and leadership. And just a note about work study students for those who may or may not be aware. So what is work study? So a federally funded program that students that have a financial need when going to college, they were given opportunities to work on campus, and funding for that comes from the federal government itself. So the library focuses on hiring students with work study awards. However, there are not a lot of students in this pool. So roughly 5% of our undergraduate students are awarded work study each year. And the awards range from $1,400 to $2,000 per year. That may sound like a lot, but we'll talk about a little further along in this presentation about what sort of barriers or issues that we have here at SUNY Oswego, and may also as well at your institutions. We hope to employ students from underprivileged backgrounds with this practice. However, we discovered the issues with providing them an equitable employment experience.
Right, so one of the first things we started revamping again was the student employment program. On the right-hand side here, you can see a recruitment flyer that we made that was used in public events to try and hire new student workers. These are skills that were reported by previous student assistants. And as part of the student employment program revamping, we created new and updated processes and materials that were shared across units. So the same materials for every single unit. This also included policies to use Handshake, which is, we'll talk about that in a few slides. It's a campus-wide system for collecting applications. So everyone now uses that online system. We also revamped the student handbook. We made new student evaluation forms and guidelines for how to use those. We also created a guided reflection form, which really gives our student assistants a chance to give us feedback and really tell us how the program works for them and what skills they think they're gaining. There's also a self-evaluation piece, so they can also tell us how they think they're doing their supervisor goes over it with them during the midterms. We also scheduled one workshop with career services. We would like to schedule more. And I should mention that that was a paid workshop, so our student assistants got to go learn about writing resumes and cover letters, and they were paid for it. So this is part of the application management system, Handshake. Again, this is used by the entire campus. Using this online system, we can reduce questions about when or if we're hiring. The job is posted, we're hiring, and anyone can point students to this rather than being unsure whether it's open or not. We coordinate dates for jobs to go live, so we all put them up at the same time so they're not coming up randomly throughout the semester. We specifically advertise which positions require work study so that there isn't any confusion about whether students can apply for that job or not and whether they qualify. A note on this is that students who qualify for work study can see those positions, and those who don't have work study won't see those positions. And it also allows students to apply for the position they specifically want or interested in, instead of just one large pool of applications. Okay, so here is an example job ad. This view is from the student side, so what they would see. Applicants can see this is an unpaid position. So this is our library student ambassador position. It lists the job details, the hourly wage, the description of the job and what the duties are, as well as an application deadline. This view is from the supervisor side, so we can see all the different jobs. We can also see how many applicants have applied for each position. And we added work study to the titles to avoid confusion. We create 2 ads if we have non-work study openings. You can see the link to resumes and cover letters, etc. They're all housed right there. And all campus jobs have to be approved by the financial aid office. You'll see all the way to the right, one at the top says pending, the others are all approved. And it also lists the expiration date for us. Another thing we looked at and revamped was the procedures document. So the new procedures outline what each new student receives at the time of hire, which was inconsistent across the units. It outlines the mid-semester review process and which documents are needed, the end of the semester evaluation process, and what documents need to be completed by the supervisor. And this document is for each supervisor in each unit. And just to mention, there's one person in our library who handles all the timesheets for all of our student assistants. The handbook was a pretty large undertaking. This new handbook was put together in the spring and summer of 2022 when we reviewed the existing handbook. It's now about 15 pages of actual content from the 2 pages that we previously started with. The multi-unit use is really important because it ensures that student assistants have the same experience regardless of where they work in the library. As I mentioned before, the previous iteration was really focused on access services. Now student assistants can expect the same policies and procedures to be followed, even if their essential job duties are completely different. The 17-page handbook covers the units and their responsibilities, different building partners we have here in the library so they can learn about those and be a little bit more knowledgeable for our patrons. It also talks about the organization of the collections, job expectations, such as greetings, interactions with patrons, basic customer service skills. It also covers policies and procedures, such as schedules, attendance, and our very brief dress code that really only covers hygiene and not having offensive images on their clothing. It also covers the evaluation process and what they can expect from that. We also created some advancement opportunities. We created a lead position initially for the access services night student position, but then decided to expand it to our other units. This creates opportunity for growth. It's good for future applications, and it also encourages retention. So after 1 year of service, students are eligible for a promotion. These student leads earn a higher rate of pay. They do have additional responsibilities and duties.
All right, now with about our student evaluations. So this is about how that we went about revising them. We created a new Born Digital form using current campus tools. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And that we expanded from those 5 areas to now 12 areas of evaluation. So this may seem like that it was a big jump. However, this came actually from the suggestion of the supervisors. And also we identified that 2 of the areas in the previous form really shouldn't be combined. We're talking about attendance and punctuality, and then dependability accuracy. Those really should have been split up and to have 4 distinct areas as opposed to clumping those 2, like clumping attendance and punctuality into one, because they can mean 2 different things. The same thing with dependability and accuracy. They can mean 2 different things, especially within a particular unit in the library. There was also space for supervisor comments and plans for improvement. And then also this created, we set up so that there would be an electronic paper trail. So in the old form that was converted to being an electronic form, it was still a PDF, and a supervisor could just print, fill it out, print it off, and then that's it. But now the form that has been created, it is submitted automatically to the unit's email account for record retention purposes. So there's one in the email account. There's also one that they can print off from there and use that for physical files if they'd like to. There is also a student self-evaluation counterpart, which we'll talk about a little bit later too, but essentially this is another part where a student can kind of rate themselves and let us know how they're feeling about their experience before it gets to the final end of the semester evaluation from their supervisor. So the forms itself, the student evaluation form was built using Google Forms. Let's see, the supervisor completes their direct supervisor completes this form, which is hosted within each unit. The student then also completes the self-evaluation form. This is something that goes on during the mid-semester. The supervisor schedules a time on or before the final work shift of the student assistant to discuss the end of semester evaluation form. And then they'll each acknowledge the review with a signature and date. A copy of the signed evaluation form would be made and provided to the student for their own records. And the original signed form is retained by the supervisor for the personal file as described in the evaluation section of the student handbook. This is really supposed to provide just another experience that they may have outside of the library when being evaluated, on a semester by semester basis or on a yearly basis in employment opportunities afterwards. So this ensures that every student assistant receives the same high quality experience working with the library if we're all using the same form. It also allows students to leave better prepared to face the challenges in their future workspace or graduate programs. And then the last point of being able to articulate the transferable skills that they acquire when they do the self-evaluation form during the middle of the semester, they're kind of seeing again the things that they first learned in the handbook about, the transferable skills that we're looking to develop, provide opportunities for students to develop in the library. When they do the self-evaluation midway through the semester, they're kind of reminded of those words again. They see it again and like, oh yeah, they're, how am I doing on dependability? How am I doing on accuracy? And then when it comes to the end of the semester evaluation from their supervisor, they're seeing those words one more time so that they are now more aware of what they're being evaluated on, and also those transferable skills that we're hoping to develop.
The student guided reflection is something that's done at the end of the semester. We provide some prompts, but it also allows for reflection from each of the student assistants. Some examples from that guided reflection are, what are you learning here at work that is helping you in school? What skills have you learned or developed in your role as a student assistant that you think you'll be able to use in the future? It also asks them what suggestions they might have or feedback for us on how to improve the experience as a student assistant.
So now we're at to the what we've learned through this entire process. What have Morgan and Aaron and I learned about this? So first, we'll say that we learned that you're not alone. We discovered that, for example, the fitness center identified similar issues, which offered a partnership opportunity in developing our program. Next, to invite input from the outside, working with career services, it brought more input. Things that, for example, things that they're looking to improve for student employment across campus, they helped also identify similar struggles that students have with translating these library work skills in marketable ways. They're very much focused on assisting students making that transition. And we identified that as well and found that to be a wonderful partnership. And we may not have done that without seeking out some of that input from the outside of how do we make these transferable skills something that is identifiable. Next, evaluation and reflection work together. So we found that our own reflection helped to drive the evaluation of our work as we created the program. So as we're doing something, we're thinking like, well, how does this relate to our intended outcome of commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, in the library. And that reflection kept on driving us to make it so that we could be better at it and whatnot. So, and then finally, to talk about the budget and the pay for student workers amongst units and other departments. So in this, individual units may not be able to raise wages for various reasons, but collectively, you may be able to work together with the library director or administration to create pathways for higher wage ceilings. And speaking of wages, so when we presented this out in Madison, Wisconsin, we wanted to make sure that people were kind of aware of what minimum wage was like in New York. And so we let them know that, our student workers start off at $13.20 an hour. It's going up to $14.20 this month. And when they come back, and if those who may not be working right now, when they come back to work for us in 2023, there will be a minimum wage increase as well. So when we also talk about how this kind of ties into student work study, the amount is static. So that $1,400 to $2,000 semester or per year breaks down to, I think when we did the math, it was somewhere between 2 and 4 hours of work per week during a semester based on minimum wage in New York. Whereas in another state where minimum wage may be closer tied to federal minimum wage, students can work more hours per week. So we kind of get into the situation at the library where either we have to hire more students more frequently because that money would run out, or we would hire more students initially and then they'd only be working 2 to 4 hours a week, and then without having to dip into library budget. That's a big thing to kind of tackle both within a small unit, within like one supervisor, and then within the entire library itself. So we wanted to offer an increased pay rate for returning student assistants that also went beyond the scheduled minimum wage bumps. Supervisors operated under old guidance for student wages that included that we could increase pay beyond minimum wage, but not for students getting paid with work study funding. So we were thinking that, oh, well, the students who aren't receiving work study, we could, if we wanted to give them a pay raise, we could, but students that make work study, no matter what, they have to remain at that minimum wage level. So this is not an equitable solution. It really wasn't. And so when we discussed this with our library director, the supervisors did this. When we talked to our library director and raised concerns about this to the campus financial aid office, the response was actually positive. We learned that we could raise the wage beyond minimum wage, that students were not students with work study did not need to be locked into minimum wage. But what this meant was, as a result, number one, there are more equitable positions for everyone, but it's also important to note that increasing the work study wages in the library required support from the library budget itself. So we could raise that wage, it was just that difference would come from the library budget. So looking ahead, this was as the program was installed and before the end of the semester. So kind of like a midway point, but really before any results were coming back as we could evaluate. So looking ahead, what we wanted to do was offer more incentives for retention. We wanted to offer more workshops with career services. So as Morgan mentioned, we offered one, but we wanted to look for more ways for offering workshops. Also to follow up with graduating students. So we could find out if some of these transferable skills that we are marketing as something that, you know, a student can understand and pick up and apply to work outside the library. Was this true? Did they find it to be helpful? What other skills that maybe we're missing do they identify helped by working at the library when they were students? Also, we were looking to standardize interview communications. So what we discovered is that after creating the program, we recognized that there wasn't a common message that was designed to be sent out to applicants who were not selected for hire. So looking ahead in the spring semester, we plan to have a common message for all supervisors to use. Also looking ahead for more handbook content, we also realized that the handbook didn't specifically instruct students on what to do with a problematic or abusive patron. This was just one of the many things in which will be in our second edition that needs revisions already. And then finally, to assess our practice for EDI as we're looking ahead, as we've installed the program, to see, you know, how can we assess what we're doing, our practices, and what is it that we can gather from outside as well that will be helpful. So you know, we are fortunate at Penfield Library that we have a building partner, the Triandaflu Institute for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Transformative Practice. Now they were founded beginning of this year, end of last year, somewhere around that time. And so as they're developing, we're hoping to build a partnership with them so that we can understand how that we can assess our practices for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then with the post-implementation review, so all the things that have happened after we've done all the evaluations, we've received the guided reflections and everything like that. So first off, with the workshop sessions, I'm going to report that we had 6 attendees from all the students that we have as student assistants. We did not collect feedback from attendees, and so we do look to gather feedback to make informed decisions regarding future workshop topics, including you know, what do students want? What would they like to see being offered that they can attend at the library, and as Morgan has said, be paid for it as well. So that's always great. Next, with the handbook, so a note from this semester is that this has already proven to be helpful as a document to refer to when issues come up with attendance or attire has come up. So since with the update to the handbook for this semester, we've already seen it in use and practice, and it's great to see that working. And also with pay increases. So there's the planning for the raises for when minimum wage increases, but we didn't really identify during the semester how that people students that made above minimum wage that do have those increases, that have those increased responsibilities, but also an increase in wage, how those would transfer into the minimum wage increasing as well. So we discussed about how to make sure that students aren't kind of waiting around, or that they don't receive some sort of increase as well, or we're waiting for a student to voice a concern and be a little bit more proactive about this process. This was not something that we initially had thought of until after the implementation of it.
So this was our first semester, this fall 2022 semester, our first semester actually implementing all of this. And we didn't expect it, but we realized from some feedback that the Google Forms we used in the process can be confusing, and we should really plan for some more training with staff to make sure everything's clear and make sure the documentation we hand out is sufficient. We had some questions about, do supervisors copy the forms for each semester? Do we all use the same one? Where do we then place them? There were also some questions about communications. So we recognize the need for a consistent message, especially for students. Why are the reviews being done? Especially, that midterm review, what's the point of this? And also to let students know that they won't be penalized by their supervisors for giving a negative guided reflection. If they think the program's terrible, we want to hear about it. We want to fix it for future student assistance. Some future adjustments after this semester and feedback from student supervisors. We've heard that this semester has been particularly challenging, and student needs and expectations are changing, which is to be expected. Our procedures may need to adapt to meet those needs. We welcome any suggestions or comments or feedback from you guys about what your experiences are this semester or previously.